The Silvercrest Palace glowed with golden light, chandeliers spilling brilliance across the marble floors of the grand ballroom. Wolves from every pack in the Northern Territories had gathered for the Alpha King's annual ball, an event of politics, alliances, and spectacle. Laughter, clinking glasses, and murmured conversations filled the air, but at the very edge of the crowd stood a young Omega who did not belong. Sarah Nightshade had learned long ago that her place was in the shadows. Omegas from the Shadow Moon pack were invisible, overlooked, tolerated only because every pack needed its lowest ranks to cook, clean, and serve. She wore a plain gown borrowed from a sympathetic maid, cream fabric already frayed at the hem, far too simple for an event dripping with silk and jewels. Her hair, auburn with streaks of silver, had been braided neatly, but it could not disguise her station. She stood quietly, clutching the edge of her skirt, wishing she had not come at all. And then he walked in. Alpha King Daemon Silvercrest. The crowd shifted as if pulled by invisible strings. Conversations stilled. Heads bowed. Sarah's breath caught. 6'5", broad shoulders filling his black formal jacket, his midnight hair falling in sharp contrast to the pale silver eyes that glowed faintly with the presence of his wolf. He was dominance and authority embodied. The air changed as he entered, thick with power, with reverence, with fear. And that was when it happened. The mate bond slammed into Sarah with the force of a lightning strike. She gasped, her hand flying to her chest. A golden thread of heat surged through her, connecting her soul to his. Her wolf leapt forward inside her mind, howling in ecstasy. Mate. 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 The word echoed until it drowned out everything else, the music, the voices, the clinking glasses. Every cell in her body trembled with recognition, every nerve alight with longing. Her knees nearly buckled under the weight of it. She stared across the room, desperate, terrified, unable to breathe. And then his eyes, those cold, silver eyes, found hers. For a single, fleeting heartbeat, she saw it. Recognition. His wolf surged just as hers had, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent across the ballroom. His jaw tightened, and she felt the pull snap taut between them. The air shimmered, the universe itself holding its breath. This was it. The story her grandmother had whispered by the fire. The miracle all wolves prayed for. The moon goddess's greatest gift. Her mate. The Alpha King himself. But then, his expression changed. Confusion flickered first. Then horror. And finally, disgust. He moved. Long, predatory strides carried him across the ballroom. The crowd parted as though sensing the storm in his presence. Sarah's heart pounded wildly. Was he coming for her? Was he going to claim her in front of everyone? Her trembling fingers tightened on her dress, her pulse a frantic drum. He stopped before her, towering above her, his scent of cedar and smoke crashing over her senses. For a moment, she thought she might faint from the sheer force of the bond. You? His voice cut through the hush like a blade. Cold. Sharp. Final. The moon goddess paired me with you? The silence was absolute. Every eye turned toward her. Sarah felt the weight of hundreds of stares pressing against her skin, each one filled with judgment, pity, or amusement. Her throat closed. Her wolf whimpered, confused, wounded. My king, her voice trembled, so soft it barely carried over the music. Don't. Daemon's hand sliced the air between them. Don't call me that. Don't speak to me at all. The humiliation scorched her cheeks, but before she could retreat, a figure slid elegantly to Daemon's side. Lady Vivian Bloodmoon. She was everything Sarah wasn't, radiant, powerful, a daughter of one of the strongest packs. Emerald eyes gleamed with triumph as she laid her jeweled hand possessively on Daemon's arm. Surely the moon goddess made an error, Vivian purred. This, Omega, cannot possibly be your mate. Sarah's chest clenched. Her wolf snarled weakly, but Damon's lips curled, sealing her fate. There is no error, he said, voice low, his silver eyes never leaving Sarah's. But there is a choice. Her heart stopped. I, Alpha King Damon Silvercrest, reject you. He paused deliberately, sneering, what is your name? Sarah's lips trembled. Sarah. Sarah Nightshade. I reject you, Sarah Nightshade, as my mate and Luna Queen. I choose Lady Vivian Bloodmoon instead. The words ripped through her like claws. The bond did not simply break, it tore. White-hot agony exploded in her chest, burning her lungs, stealing her breath. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, clawing at the floor as the mate bond unraveled thread by thread. Her wolf howled in her mind, a keening cry of grief so raw she thought she might go mad. Around her, whispers rose like venomous smoke. Pity. Laughter. Relief that it wasn't them. Accept the rejection, Omega, Damon said coldly, already turning away. Or I'll have you removed from my territory. Tears blurred her vision, but somehow she forced the words out through the shards of her soul. I accept. And with that, the bond shattered completely. Her world went silent. Empty. Ashes where fire had once been. The rejection should have ended her story. That was what the pack believed, what the gathered nobles whispered as they turned their backs. An Omega with no bond was nothing. Disposable. Forgotten. But what no one knew, not even Sarah, was that the rejection had been planned long before the moon goddess revealed her hand. Deep in the labyrinthine corridors of the palace, Lady Vivian Bloodmoon moved like a shadow. Her emerald gown shimmered with each step, her lips curved in a smile that did not reach her eyes. Behind her, two witches draped in dark cloaks followed silently, their hands faintly glowing with the remnants of spellwork. Did you see the look on her face? Vivian's voice dripped with satisfaction. She actually believed the bond mattered. As if a pathetic Omega could ever sit on the throne. One of the witches, the elder with bone-white hair, inclined her head. The illusion held. The Alpha King believes the prophecy as we crafted it. He saw only what we allowed. Vivian paused, turning to face them. Candlelight gleamed off the sharp planes of her face. Remind me. Tell me again what Damon saw in his vision. The witch's lips curled. He saw the ruin of his pack. The moon's flame consumed by shadows. And at the center, a girl with auburn hair and silver-streaked eyes. An Omega who would bring destruction. Vivian's smile widened. And he believed it. Of course he did, the second witch murmured. The bond makes him vulnerable, open to suggestion. A little nudge, a flicker of fear, and he was ours to guide. He thinks rejecting her was his choice. That is the beauty of it. Vivian's chest swelled with triumph. For years, she had clawed her way through court politics, weaving favors and debts, trading whispers for power. But no amount of ambition could place her on the throne, until fate gave her Sarah Nightshade. Or rather, until she twisted fate itself. Let the moon goddess try again, she said coldly. The title of Luna belongs to me. And Damon will learn to see it that way. The witches exchanged a glance, unreadable. But they said nothing. Meanwhile, far from the silken halls, Sarah stumbled through the servant's wing, clutching her stomach. The bond's destruction had left her hollow, a phantom ache gnawing at her chest with every step. She barely registered the sympathetic glances of a few maids who dared look at her. Most avoided her gaze altogether, eager to escape the stink of rejection that now clung to her like rot. She collapsed on her narrow cot in the servants' quarters, curling into herself. Her wolf whimpered endlessly in her mind, a sound she could not silence. Tears soaked her pillow until she had none left to give. Hours passed. Perhaps days. Time was meaningless when all she could feel was absence. But somewhere in the quiet, a thought flickered. Weak, fragile, but stubborn. It wasn't just his choice. The memory pressed in, the way his eyes had widened, the moment of recognition, the pull that had been undeniable. He had felt it too. She was sure of it. Something had twisted it. Corrupted it. But who would believe her? She was an Omega, powerless, with no voice against a king's decree. In the throne room, Damon sat alone, his hands braced on the arms of his chair. He had dismissed the council, silenced the courtiers, and yet silence brought no peace. The rejection should have brought relief, should have freed him from the gnawing pull of the bond. Instead, his chest felt like stone, heavy and cold. Marcus, his beta, entered quietly. It is done, then? Damon's jaw clenched. It had to be. She's weak. The pack would never follow her. Perhaps, Marcus said carefully. Or perhaps you've been listening to too many whispers. Prophecies can be twisted. Fear is a weapon. Damon's head snapped up, silver eyes flashing. Do you doubt me, Marcus? No, the beta said smoothly. But I wonder if you doubt yourself. The words lingered long after Marcus left. Back in Vivian's chambers, a raven perched on the window sill, its eyes glowing faintly with magic. The witches fed it scraps of bloodied parchment, murmuring incantations. Images flickered in the smoke rising from the brazier, visions of Sarah, curled in pain, isolated and broken. Good, Vivian whispered, running a jeweled finger along the bird's beak. Let her suffer. The pack will forget her, and Damon will remember only me. But the moon goddess does not forget so easily. Far above the palace, the full moon blazed brighter, casting silver light across the forests. Fate had been twisted, yes, but not severed. The bond still pulsed faintly, fragile but alive, a thread that would one day pull taut again. And when it did, neither Damon nor Vivian would be ready for the storm it carried. The days after the rejection passed in a blur. Sarah barely ate, barely slept, her body moving through shadows while her mind remained chained to the moment Damon's cold words had severed their bond. She thought the pain had reached its peak at the ball. She thought she had nothing left to lose. She was wrong. It began with a scream. Sarah was scrubbing the marble steps leading to the throne room when the shrill cry of a maid echoed through the corridors. Moments later, guards thundered past, their heavy boots shaking the floor. She froze, bristles dripping suds onto the stone. Something in their eyes, hard, merciless, made her blood run cold. You. The captain's voice cracked like a whip. Omega, on your feet. Sarah rose shakily. What's happening? The answer came in the form of iron shackles snapping around her wrists. You are under arrest for theft against the crown. Her mind reeled. What? No. The captain yanked her forward. Save your breath for the Alpha King. The throne room was packed when they dragged her in. Nobles lined the edges, murmuring eagerly. Sarah's heart pounded as she saw the object displayed on a velvet cushion before the throne, a necklace glittering with pale light, the Luna's moonstone. An heirloom said to have been passed down through generations of queens. The captain dropped to one knee. Your Majesty, we found it hidden in her quarters. Gasps rippled through the court. Sarah stumbled forward, her voice hoarse. That's a lie. I never touched it. I didn't even know what it looked like until now. All eyes turned to the Alpha King. Damon sat rigidly on his throne, silver eyes unreadable, his jaw clenched tight. Beside him, Lady Vivian stood with hands folded demurely, though the faint curve of her lips betrayed her satisfaction. "Speak," Damon said at last, his tone low and dangerous. "I didn't steal it," Sarah whispered. Her knees threatened to give way beneath her. "Please, my king." "I swear it. Someone planted it. Someone." "Enough." His voice cracked like thunder, silencing her. For a moment, she thought she saw something flicker across his face, hesitation, doubt. His wolf shifted restlessly beneath his skin, the bond still echoing faintly even in its severed state. But then Vivian leaned closer, her voice a velvet whisper only he could hear. "She's lying, Damon. You see how desperate she is. An Omega thief would disgrace you." The doubt hardened into stone. Damon's gaze locked on Sarah, and when he spoke, the words sealed her fate. "For theft against the crown, I sentence you to banishment." The hall erupted with murmurs. "Banishment?" one noble scoffed. "She'll be dead within a week." The captain smirked. "A merciful sentence, sire." Sarah's breath caught. "Banishment? Please, no. Not the wastes. I won't survive." "You should have thought of that before you betrayed your king," Damon said coldly. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed, chains clattering. She wanted to scream, to curse, to demand proof, but the weight of the room pressed down on her. She was nothing. An Omega. A rejected mate. And now, a criminal branded in front of the entire court. Hours later, she was dragged to a reinforced vehicle waiting beyond the palace gates. Snow fell in thick flakes, settling into her hair and lashes as the guards shoved her inside. The journey north was endless. Through the barred window, she watched the lush forests fade into barren tundra, the green swallowed by endless white. No warmth. No life. Only death waiting in the frozen wastelands. At last, the vehicle screeched to a halt. One guard pulled her roughly to her feet and shoved her toward the snow. "This is where you get off." Sarah shivered violently, her thin dress offering no protection. "At least give me food. Water. Something." The guard's eyes were cold. "Orders are orders. The Alpha King wanted you to have nothing." And then they left her. The engine roared, tires spraying snow as the vehicle vanished into the horizon. Silence swallowed her whole. She stood there trembling, the icy wind biting into her skin like knives. Each breath burned her lungs. She stumbled forward, her boots sinking deep into the snow, her chains weighing her down. Her wolf whimpered inside, weak and fractured from the broken bond. "This is how I die," she whispered. But some stubborn part of her refused. Hours later, she found shelter in a shallow cave carved into the side of a cliff. The floor was stone cold, the air barely warmer than the blizzard outside. She curled into a ball, hugging herself for warmth as tears froze on her cheeks. Yet, even in her despair, a single ember glowed. "I will not die here," she whispered into the darkness. "Not like this. Not by his hand. Not by hers." The words tasted like steel on her tongue. For the first time since the rejection, anger pushed back against the grief. The Alpha King had cast her aside. Vivian had marked her for ruin. But she would not give them the satisfaction of her death. If she was to die, it would not be because she gave up. The night howled outside, but within the hollow of the cave, Sarah's eyes hardened. The Omega the world had forgotten would survive. And when the time came, the Alpha King would learn the truth of what he had thrown away. The world narrowed to white and wind. Snow needled Sarah's skin like 1,000 tiny blades. The gale screamed across the open tundra, erasing her footsteps as quickly as she made them. She had no coat, no gloves, no food, just a thin dress, shackles chafing her wrists, and a stubborn ember inside that refused to die. She moved because stopping meant death. Stumbling across the broken crust of ice, she scanned the ridgeline for anything, rock, brush, the shadow of a cave. Her wolf whined, small and battered by the severed bond, but still there. Still hers. There, she croaked, throat raw from the cold. A low seam in the cliff face, half concealed by drifts. She clawed toward it, palms burning, and slid inside. The cave was shallow and mercilessly cold, but the wind softened to a dull moan. She collapsed against the stone, dragging her shackled hands beneath her body to trap what little heat she had left. Her teeth rattled so hard her skull ached. She tucked her bare feet under her dress, curled tight, and let the shuddering take her. She lasted the night by counting breaths. At dawn, she could not feel her fingers. She forced them open anyway. Move. Hunt. Live. The first days blurred into a brutal rhythm. She broke ice with a rock and drank the metallic-tasting melt. She pried frozen moss from crevices to chew and keep nausea at bay. She found a shard of slate and worked it against stone until it sharpened, her makeshift knife glinting faintly like hope. When a pale hair flashed across the snow, instinct took over. She lunged, missed, fell, rose, tried again, until at last the blade found purchase. She cried when the warm steam rose from the meat, not from disgust, but relief so animal it humbled her. Each night, she returned to her cave, arranging stones into a narrow ring. Spark, she begged the flint she'd finally chipped loose from the wall. Spark, spark, and once, blessedly, it did. Fire bloomed like a miracle. The tiny flame licked her trembling hands and promised, not tonight. Not yet. On the 5th day, she found a deeper tunnel tucked behind a narrow gap in the cliff, easy to miss unless you were starving and desperate and too stubborn to die. The passage opened into a chamber with a black pool steaming in the chill air. Hot springs. Sarah fell to her knees and wept for a long, shaking minute before she washed the blood and grime from her skin and let heat burrow into her bones. "Thank you," she whispered into the cavern's breath. She did not know if she thanked the earth or the moon goddess or the part of herself that had kept walking. Perhaps all three. Strength returned in inches, not miles. She stripped tough sinew from game to lash a spear. She wove a crude line to hang strips of meat over the warm vents to dry. She learned the patterns of the sky, the brief, watery noon, the long blue hour, the swift, devouring night. When the wind relented, she ranged farther, mapping the land by memory, the jag of black rock like a wolf's tooth, the wind-carved drift that creaked like a door in the dark, the split boulder that sheltered a stubborn clutch of winter berries beneath its lip. Sometimes, when she lay on warm stone above the springs, she felt the absence in her chest like a hollow bell. Damon's rejection had left a wound that fire could not touch. Her wolf curled around it, keening quietly. Sarah pressed her palm there and breathed through the ache until it dulled. Grief, then anger, then something colder and more useful, resolve. "You will not be the end of me," she told the memory of his silver eyes. Weeks, not days, she knew it by the lengthening light. After her banishment, new miseries found her. Morning came with a sudden, violent heave that sent her scrambling to retch beside the pool. She spat, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and blamed bad meat. When it returned the next day, and the next, she stopped blaming the meat. Exhaustion settled like wet wool over her shoulders. She slept 12 hours and woke tired. Sounds seemed louder, the brittle crack of ice, the whisper of snow sliding from rock. Scents sharpened until she could sort the wind as if it were a braid, fox, hare, iron, storm. Her chest swelled and ached strangely, tenderness at her ribs that had nothing to do with bruises. The worst, the one she could not argue with, arrived quietly. Her heat should have come and went, her body did not miss such rhythms. It did not come. Sarah sat on the stone lip of the spring, steam curling around her, palms pressed flat to her abdomen. The cavern dripped. Somewhere above, wind howled. She closed her eyes. No, she whispered, and heard the tremor of fear in it. No, not this. Not here. Not alone. Her wolf stirred, truer and stronger than it had been since the ballroom, a low, steady hum like a lantern catching. Listen, it seemed to say. Not words, but knowing. Sarah slid lower, the warm rock at her back, one hand stilling over the flat plane of her belly. She slowed her breath. The world narrowed again, not to white and wind, but to the dark curve of herself. She listened past the echo of her pulse, past the cavern's drip, past the rush of blood in her own veins. She did not hear with ears. She felt it. A flicker against her palm, softer than moth wings. Then another, answering. Her breath hitched. Tears welled without burning, as if her eyes knew this water should be given freely. 2. Not one, but 2 lights kindling beneath her hand, small, stubborn sparks stitched to her by something holier than court decrees or a king's cold voice. The broken mate bond had not erased what had already been written in the body's quieter language. Twins, she breathed, a laugh breaking on the word, wild and disbelieving and fierce. Moon, help me. Twins. For a moment terror surged, the memory of iron on her wrists, of Damon's sentence, of the emptiness he'd left in her chest. She saw herself on the snow with 2 tiny lives and no pack to circle them, no midwife's sure hands, no safety but a cave and a spear. Then the terror met something larger. She curled both hands over them. Listen to me, she whispered, voice steadier than she felt. You are not a mistake. You are not a secret to be hidden or a shame to be cast out. You are mine. And I will not let this world decide your worth the way it tried to decide mine. The cavern held her vow and gave it back to her. That night, she climbed from the springs to the mouth of the cave. The storm had spent itself. Above the black line of the horizon, the sky rippled with color, green and violet veils unfurling in slow, silent waves. Sarah had never seen the aurora. She wrapped her thin dress tighter and stood barefoot in the snow, heat from the stones still in her bones, and let the light spill over her upturned face. It felt like an answer. Not rescue. Not mercy. A sign. She went back inside and ate, and then she worked, tightening the lashings of her spear, braiding sinew, inventorying dried meat, arranging furs into a warmer nest. She slept with one hand on her belly, and when the first faint kick brushed her palm weeks later, she smiled into the dark. The Alpha King had left her to die. Instead, she had found a reason to live. Not for him. For them. By the time her belly had begun to swell beneath her dress, Sarah had grown stronger in ways she could hardly believe. What should have killed her 10 times over had instead honed her into something sharper, more resilient. Every day was a battle, but every victory, no matter how small, a rabbit snared, a fire coaxed from damp wood, a night survived without frostbite, was proof that she could endure. Still, loneliness gnawed at her worse than hunger. Nights stretched long and silent, broken only by the occasional howl of some distant, unseen wolf. Sarah told herself she didn't miss anyone, that she was better off alone than betrayed again. But when her hand brushed her stomach and she felt the faintest kick, she whispered to the tiny lives inside her as if they could hear. You'll never be alone, she promised. Not like I was. It was on such a night, when the aurora shimmered faintly overhead, that the scent reached her. Wolves. Not one. Many. Her heart stuttered in her chest. Instinct screamed at her to run. Wolves in the wastes meant rogues, and rogues were more dangerous than the blizzards themselves. Wolves stripped of their pack bonds, turned savage, ruled only by hunger and rage. But this scent was different. It wasn't chaotic. It carried unity, a strange thread of cooperation woven through the sharp tang of wild. Curiosity overcame fear. Sarah followed the scent until the snow thinned and torchlight flickered between the rocks of a half-sheltered ravine. She crouched behind a drift, eyes wide. What she saw stole her breath. Nearly 20 wolves moved about the clearing, but not as feral loners. They worked. Built. Some carried logs, stacking them into crude walls. Others stitched hides into tents. A handful sparred in the snow, their movements fluid and disciplined. Laughter echoed, rough but real, the sound of a community rather than chaos. Sarah had never seen rogues behave like this. "You can come out," a voice called suddenly. A woman's, firm but not hostile. "We know you're there." Sarah's heart lurched. Slowly, shakily, she stepped from her hiding place, both hands raised in surrender. Her wolf bristled under her skin, whispering to flee, but she forced herself forward. A tall woman strode from the circle of light to meet her. Scars marked her arms, and her hair, streaked with silver, was bound back in a warrior's braid. But her eyes, cool, gray, and watchful, did not shine with malice. "Easy," the woman said, lowering her torch. "We're not here to hurt you." She glanced over Sarah's frame, taking in her gaunt cheeks, torn dress, and the curve of her belly. "Moon above, you're pregnant." Sarah swallowed. "Please. I don't want trouble. I'll go. Just, don't chase me." The woman's brow furrowed. "You'd last another night out there? Not in your state. What's your name?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Nightshade." The woman nodded slowly. "I'm Kira. This is the Frostborn Pack." Sarah blinked. "Pack? But, you're rogues." "We were," Kira said. "Now we're something else. Cast-offs, exiles, wolves with nowhere else to go. We've built our own pack here, one where rank doesn't decide worth." Emotion rose, sharp and unexpected, in Sarah's throat. "I don't have anything to offer you. I'm weak. And," she glanced down at her belly, trembling. "And I won't be much use for long." Kira stepped closer, her expression softening. "You've survived this long alone. That makes you stronger than you think. And those pups," she tilted her head, as though listening to something unseen. "They're powerful. I can feel it already. Alpha-born." Sarah's stomach twisted. "Their father doesn't matter. He doesn't exist to us." Kira studied her for a long, silent moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. But if you want it, you have a place here. We'll protect you. We'll help you bring them into the world. And in return, you fight with us. You help us build something better than the packs that rejected us." Tears blurred Sarah's vision before she could stop them. Her wolf, long silent and wounded, stirred in her chest. For the first time since Damon had shattered her, she felt something other than grief and rage. Hope. "Yes," she whispered. "Please. I'll stay." Kira smiled, sharp and approving. "Then welcome to the Frostborn, Sarah Nightshade." The others approached cautiously, some curious, some wary, but none with the contempt she'd seen all her life. A few even smiled at her, offered scraps of dried meat, nodded as if she belonged. And just like that, Sarah found herself surrounded, not by enemies, but by something she hadn't known she was still searching for. A family. As the wind howled above the ravine, Sarah rested her hands over her stomach. Her babies shifted within, alive and strong, as though they too sensed the change. For the first time, she whispered not a vow of survival, but a future. "You'll be born into a world where you are wanted," she told them. "I swear it." And the night did not feel so cold. Snow blanketed the frozen wastes in endless white, yet for the first time since her rejection, Sarah Nightshade did not feel like a ghost drifting through a world that wanted her dead. The Frostborn pack had taken her in, not as a burden, but as one of their own. These wolves were broken like her, cast out, betrayed, exiled. And yet together, they were building something stronger than any kingdom she had ever known. But belonging came with a price. "Pick it up," Kira ordered, tossing her a wooden staff one bitter morning. The leader of the Frostborn stood tall and scarred, her eyes sharp as steel. Sarah blinked down at the weapon, her hands trembling. I don't know how to fight." "Then you'll learn," Kira replied. "Pregnant or not, if you want to live here, you pull your weight. Those pups inside you will need a mother who can defend them." Sarah's wolf stirred at the words. Strong enough to protect them. That was reason enough. She tightened her grip on the staff. The first lessons were merciless. Kira disarmed her within seconds, knocking her into the snow again and again. Her body screamed in protest, her back aching, her joints stiff, her lungs burning. More than once she lay on the ground, ready to give up. But then she thought of the tiny lives growing inside her, and something inside her hardened. Each time she rose again, shaking, battered, but unbroken. "You're stubborn," Kira muttered one afternoon, hauling her back to her feet. "I'm not stubborn," Sarah gasped, her breath white in the cold air. "I'm desperate." "Good," Kira said. "Desperation makes survivors. Survivors make leaders." And slowly, desperation became strength. By her second month among the Frostborn, Sarah could spar without collapsing. By her third, she was reading Kira's movements, blocking strikes, even landing a few of her own. The first time she knocked Kira back a step, the entire pack cheered her name. Her wolf, too, began to stir, hesitant at first, but more present with each victory. One night, she dreamed of her wolf standing tall in the snow, eyes glowing gold, no longer cowering in the shadows. The next morning, she shifted. It wasn't perfect. Her wolf form was smaller than most, lean where others were powerful, but it was fast enough to dart through the snow like a shadow. When she returned to human form, the pack gave her a name, Swiftfang. For the first time in her life, her wolf wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was something to be proud of. The Frostborn gave her more than training. They gave her a family. Around the fire, she learned their stories, wolves cast out for defying abusive alphas, for being born Omega, for refusing cruel traditions. They were exiles, rejects, survivors. And with them, Sarah no longer felt like a mistake. She felt like she belonged. Her belly grew rounder with each passing moon. The pups kicked often, strong and restless, reminding her that she was never alone. The others would lay hands on her stomach with awe, whispering about the powerful energy radiating from the unborn twins. Her wolf seemed to draw strength from them as well, healing faster, growing fiercer. "They'll be alphas," Elena, the pack healer, said softly one evening as she pressed her hands against Sarah's belly. "You can already feel it in them. Stronger than most. Destined for something great. Alphas. Like their father." For a moment, the thought of Damon's silver eyes cut into her heart. But instead of collapsing under grief, she straightened her spine. These children were not his. He had given up that right when he chose to reject her, when he sentenced her to die. They were hers alone. And she would raise them in love, not scorn. In strength, not shame. One night, as snow fell in silent curtains outside the cave, Kira sat beside her by the fire. "You've changed," she said, her eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "When you came here, you were fragile. Now, you're harder. Sharper. The others look to you. You don't see it yet, but you're becoming a leader." Sarah shook her head. "I'm no leader. I'm just trying to survive." "Survival is the first step to leadership," Kira replied. "One day, wolves far beyond this camp will need someone like you. Someone who understands pain but refuses to let it break her. Someone who can turn rejection into fire." Sarah stared into the flames, her hand brushing over her stomach. Perhaps Kira was right. Perhaps her story wasn't ending at all. Perhaps it was only beginning. That night, as she curled into her furs, she whispered to her unborn twins. "You are my strength now. My purpose. And one day, when you ask me where you came from, I'll tell you this: you were born from rejection, but raised in fire. And nothing, nothing, will ever break you." Her wolf stirred, fierce and certain. And for the first time, Sarah didn't just feel hope. She felt destiny. 8 months had passed since the Alpha King's Ball. 8 months since Damon Silvercrest had stood before his kingdom and rejected the mate chosen for him by the moon goddess. 8 months of ruling with Lady Vivian at his side, his chosen Luna, his political triumph, his supposed partner in strength. And yet, every morning, Damon woke with the same gnawing emptiness in his chest. It began subtly. A flicker of unease when Vivian touched his arm. The faint recoil of his wolf whenever she smiled. The way the halls of the palace, once vibrant with the pulse of pack life, now felt hollow, like something vital had gone missing. The bond he had expected to form with his chosen Luna never came. Chosen mates weren't like fated ones. The bond was weaker, slower, but it was supposed to grow over time. Instead, every day only widened the gulf between them. His wolf howled in the back of his mind, restless, furious, refusing Vivian at every turn. At night Damon dreamed of a gray-eyed girl crumpled on a throne room floor, her tears gleaming like shards of glass. He would jolt awake, his heart hammering, clawing at his chest as though some invisible chain still tied him to the one he had cast aside. Her name haunted him. Sarah. He had barely spoken it when he tore her world apart, and now he couldn't escape it. The truth pressed on him during quiet moments. When an Omega servant passed in the hall and flinched at Vivian's sharp tone. When he smelled wildflowers in the spring air and remembered the faint scent that had clung to Sarah's skin. When he saw a young she-wolf lower her eyes at court, and something in him recoiled at the memory of gray eyes brimming with hurt. Vivian, on the other hand, thrived. She smiled at banquets, sharp and glittering. She whispered into his ear during council meetings, shaping decisions that benefited her blood moon family. She replaced his advisors one by one with men loyal to her father. She pressed for harsher punishments, for stricter laws against Omegas. "You're too lenient," she told him once, after he had reduced a sentence for theft. "Omegas are dangerous when you let them think they're worth more than scraps. Cull the weak, Damon, and you'll breathe strength into your kingdom." His wolf snarled so loudly it nearly broke his control. That night, Damon stood alone on the palace balcony, silver eyes reflecting the moon. His hands gripped the railing until the stone cracked beneath his strength. "Weak," Vivian had said. "Cull the weak." The words twisted inside him like poison thorns. Because in his dreams, the Omega he had called weak never bowed. She had cried, yes, broken and bleeding, but her eyes had held something more. Something strong. Something he had crushed before it could bloom. "Moon goddess," he muttered into the night, his voice raw, "what have I done?" The nightmares grew worse. He dreamed of snow and blood, of a small wolf stumbling through endless white, crying out for help that never came. He would wake gasping, his sheets soaked with sweat, his claws buried in the mattress. His wolf would whisper one word over and over, mate. 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 But she was gone. Dead, most likely. No one survived banishment to the frozen wastes. He had sent her there himself. The guilt was a living thing, devouring him from the inside. At council, his temper frayed. He snapped at advisors, paced the throne room like a caged beast, dismissed Vivian's simpering words with cold silence. The kingdom began to whisper. The Alpha King was restless, volatile, on edge. Vivian noticed too. "You've been distracted lately," she said one evening as she slipped into his chambers in a gown of emerald silk. She touched his chest, her nails grazing his skin. "Perhaps you need a true Luna's comfort." His wolf bared its teeth so violently that Damon shoved her hand away. "Leave me." Her smile faltered, then sharpened. "Still dreaming of her, aren't you? The little Omega? Don't be a fool, Damon. She's dead. You killed her yourself." The words sliced through him. He had rejected Sarah, humiliated her, sentenced her to death in the wasteland. And still, she lived inside him more than Vivian ever could. That night, he stared into the fire until dawn. He could no longer lie to himself. The hollow ache in his chest, the fury of his wolf, the way the world felt colder since the ball, it all meant one thing. He had made the worst mistake of his life. And the moon goddess, cruel and silent, offered no reprieve. For months Damon had carried his guilt like a curse, silent and suffocating. But what had been gnawing unease soon sharpened into suspicion. Things in his kingdom weren't adding up. It began with whispers among the guards. Inconsistencies in reports. Advisors who had once served his father suddenly replaced by men with blood moon loyalty. And then there was the necklace, the Luna's moonstone heirloom that had damned Sarah to banishment. Damon had sentenced her with his own voice, yet he had never questioned how it had ended up in her quarters. Until one winter evening when a servant, trembling, mentioned seeing Lady Vivian wearing it weeks after the trial. The words rooted in his mind like a poisonous vine. That night, Damon summoned the case records. He dismissed Vivian with a curt excuse and locked himself in his private study. Scroll after scroll, testimony after testimony, none of it made sense. The guards contradicted themselves. The timeline was broken. The chain of evidence had holes wide enough to drive a carriage through. And then one name appeared again and again, a single guard whose words had carried the weight of proof. Damon ordered him brought to his chambers at once. The man arrived pale and shaking, his uniform damp with sweat. Damon didn't bother with pleasantries. "Look at me," he commanded, his silver eyes glowing faintly. The guard obeyed, trapped under the Alpha King's power. "Tell me the truth. How did the necklace come to be in Sarah Nightshade's room?" The guard's lips trembled. For a moment he fought, then the weight of Damon's aura crushed him into submission. "Lady Vivian," he whispered hoarsely. "She paid me to plant it. Said it was for the good of the kingdom. That the Omega was dangerous, unfit for you. She promised I'd be protected." The words cracked something inside Damon. He rose slowly, his claws extending before he even realized it. "You framed her," he growled, his voice low and lethal. "And I believed you." The guard fell to his knees, sobbing. But Damon's mind was already elsewhere. Sarah. The mate he had rejected. The mate he had sentenced. The mate he had damned, based on lies. By dawn, Vivian was dragged before him in chains. The council chamber fell silent as Damon entered, a storm in his silver eyes. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice ringing across the marble floor. Did you plant the evidence? Did you poison my judgment? Vivian lifted her chin, still regal despite the iron shackles. I did what had to be done, she hissed. The moon goddess made a mistake. You cannot tie a king to an omega. She was weak, Damon. Pathetic. She would have destroyed everything your father built. You destroyed everything, Damon snapped. You destroyed me. She laughed then, sharp and cruel. No, Damon. You destroyed yourself. I only handed you the knife. You were so desperate to prove your strength that you threw her away without a second thought. That's who you are. A king who kills his own mate. Her words cut deeper than claws. His wolf roared inside him, grief and rage bleeding together until his vision blurred. But Damon forced control. He would not kill her. That would be mercy. Vivian Bloodmoon, he declared, his voice shaking with fury, you are guilty of conspiracy, treason, and the murder of my mate. I strip you of the Luna's title. I dissolve our bond. And I condemn you to life imprisonment, rotting in the dungeons you built for others. Vivian struggled as the guards dragged her away, her laughter echoing in the halls. She's dead, Damon. Your precious Omega is dead in the snow, and it's your fault. You'll never forgive yourself. Never. But Damon barely heard her. Because even as she spat venom, something had shifted. His wolf wasn't mourning. Not fully. There was a thread of hope, faint but undeniable, tugging in his chest. It came to him in the study hours later, when he sat staring at the broken seal of Sarah's case file. 8 months. That was how long it had been since her banishment. No one survived the frozen wastes. And yet, his wolf clawed at him, restless, insistent. Alive. The word hummed through his bones. Alive. Damon stood so suddenly his chair crashed backward. He could no longer sit in shadow and grief. He would go north himself. He would comb every frozen mile if he had to. He would find her, or her bones, or any proof that his mate had not been erased so cruelly. And if by some miracle she lived. Then Damon Silvercrest would spend the rest of his life on his knees if that's what it took to make her forgive him. The king who had rejected his mate was finally ready to beg. The northern winds howled that night like a chorus of ghosts, rattling through the caverns of the Frostborn Pack's hidden refuge. Sarah clutched her swollen belly, her breath coming in ragged bursts, as the first contraction slammed through her body. It's too soon, she gasped, gripping the edge of the furs. 3 weeks early. Kira, the scarred leader who had become her protector, crouched at her side, eyes fierce. Twins never wait for the full moon. Listen to me, Sarah, you survived the wastes, you've built a life here. You can survive this too. Now breathe. But surviving this was nothing like surviving blizzards or hunger. This was fire tearing her apart from the inside. Her wolf clawed desperately against her skin, lending what strength it could, but even together they were struggling. Alpha twins inside an Omega body, it was dangerous, maybe deadly. Elena, the healer, pressed a damp cloth to Sarah's forehead. Focus on my voice. Contractions mean progress. Every wave brings your children closer. My children, Sarah whispered through clenched teeth. She would hold on to that thought. Not Damon's. Not the Alpha King's. Hers. Hours bled together in a haze of agony. The den echoed with her cries, her nails ripping into the pelts beneath her. Outside, the Frostborn Pack stood guard, silent and ready, their breath misting in the night air. The entire pack seemed to pulse with her labor, as if they too were waiting for something greater than themselves. After what felt like eternity, Elena's voice broke through. Sarah, now. Push. She bore down with a scream that tore her throat raw, and then, suddenly, the air was filled with a sound that wasn't her own. A thin, furious cry. "A boy," Elena announced, lifting the wailing bundle wrapped in furs. "Strong lungs on this one." Sarah reached weakly, tears blurring her sight. The baby was placed against her chest, small but warm, his dark hair damp, his scent unmistakable. A piece of her. A piece of Damon. But there was no time to rest. Another contraction seized her, even more brutal than before. "There's another," Kira reminded her, steadying her shaking hands. "One more, Sarah. You can do this." She pushed until her body trembled on the edge of collapse. And then, another cry, softer but piercing, filled the den. "A girl," Elena said, her own voice breaking with awe. "She has her father's eyes." Sarah blinked back tears as the second child was placed beside the first. The boy squirmed with restless energy, while the girl gazed at her mother with quiet, startling silver eyes. Twins. Alive. Hers. "Hello, my miracles," Sarah whispered, pulling them close against her chest. Exhaustion dragged at her, but joy, pure and overwhelming, kept her awake. "You'll never be alone. You'll never be unwanted. I swear it." Elena touched her shoulder gently. "What will you call them?" Sarah looked at her son first, who gripped her finger with surprising strength. "Kai," she murmured. "It means warrior. He already fights to live." Then her gaze moved to the girl, whose tiny hand rested against her heart. "And Luna. Not for a title, not for a throne. For the moon itself. My light in the darkness." The pack erupted in soft howls outside, the ancient welcome for new life. The sound filled the cavern like a blessing, wrapping the three of them in a promise of belonging. Sarah kissed her children's foreheads, her voice fierce even through her tears. "You are nightshades. You are frostborn. And you are mine." But in the south, far from the birthing den, another story was unfolding. Alpha King Damon Silvercrest rode through the frozen wastes, snow whipping against his cloak. For days he had followed faint traces, a burned-out fire pit, animal bones, a scrap of fabric that had once been a dress. Each discovery sent his wolf into a frenzy. "Alive," the instinct whispered. She was alive. And then he found it, deep in a cave, hidden by stone and shadow. The remnants of a nest, furs arranged carefully, a bloodstain still fresh enough to scent. And within that scent, Damon caught something that drove him to his knees. Not just Sarah. Something else. Smaller. Fragile. Familiar. Pups. His heart pounded in disbelief, in hope, in terror. She was pregnant, he whispered, his voice breaking against the cave walls. My mate was carrying my children. The revelation shattered him. The wolf inside howled, demanding he search every corner of the north until he found her. And for the first time since the night he'd cast her aside, Damon Silvercrest felt something stronger than regret. Hope. The Frostborn settlement was alive with morning light, snow glittering like crushed diamonds across the clearing. Wolves moved between cabins, carrying wood, laughing children trailing at their heels. At the center stood Sarah, dressed in furs and leather armor, her long hair braided like a warrior queen's. Kai and Luna played nearby, their small bodies already brimming with raw alpha energy. It was the sound of foreign boots crunching against snow that silenced the camp. The sentries stiffened. A ripple of tension spread through the Frostborn as a small group approached from the southern border. And at their head, broad shoulders, midnight hair, silver eyes burning, was Alpha King Damon Silvercrest. Sarah's stomach twisted. Months of peace, months of raising her children far from his shadow, shattered in an instant. She stood tall, her hand instinctively brushing against the daggers at her waist. "Let him come," she ordered coldly. "But alone." The pack obeyed. When Damon entered the clearing, every frostborn wolf formed a ring of silent warning around their leader. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. His eyes found hers. Alive. The word echoed through his mind, so loud it nearly broke him. She wasn't the fragile Omega he had rejected. She was fire and steel now, stronger than any Luna he had ever imagined. "Sarah," he breathed, his voice raw. "Alpha King," she answered, her tone sharp as frost. "You stand on frostborn land. State your purpose before I have you escorted back to your kingdom." Damon's chest ached. He wanted to fall to his knees right there, beg for forgiveness, explain everything. Instead, he forced his voice steady. "I came to find you. To tell you the truth. Vivian lied. She framed you. You rejected me," Sarah cut in, her voice slicing through his words. "You sentenced me to death. You didn't need Vivian's lies for that. That choice was all yours." Her words struck like claws, but he didn't flinch. "I know. And I will regret it every day for the rest of my life. I don't expect forgiveness. I only came to see if you—" "Mama," a small voice interrupted. Both turned. Kai ran across the snow, his dark hair tousled, his little legs carrying him straight to Sarah's side. Behind him came Luna, slower, cautious, her silver eyes sharp and assessing. "Mama, who is he?" Kai asked, pointing at Damon with innocent curiosity. "He smells like us." Sarah's throat closed. She'd hoped for more time before this moment. But fate was cruel. She placed a protective hand on each child's shoulder. "This is Damon," she said evenly. "Your father." Damon staggered as though struck. His knees hit the snow before he realized he'd fallen. His wolf howled inside him, recognition crashing through his veins. They were his. His children. His heirs. Kai tilted his head. "You're an alpha too." Damon's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," he whispered, his voice breaking. "And you, little warrior, you're mine." Kai puffed his chest proudly, but Luna stepped forward, her gaze unflinching. "You made Mama cry," she said softly, but the weight of accusation in her voice was heavier than any blade. "She still has sad dreams. Why should we want you here?" The words cut Damon deeper than rejection ever had. He lowered his head to her, silver eyes burning with sincerity. "You're right. I hurt her. I hurt all of you. And I will never deserve your forgiveness. But if you'll let me, I want to earn my place. Not as your king. Not as your alpha. Just as your father." Sarah's jaw tightened, her arms tightening around her children. "You don't get to claim them because of blood," she said coldly. "You forfeited that when you cast us aside." "Then let me prove it," Damon pleaded, his voice raw. "Let me visit. Let me show them, show you, that I've changed. I'll give up my throne if I must. I'll kneel to the Frostborn if that's the price. Just, don't shut me out of their lives. Please." The clearing was silent. Every wolf listened, waiting. Sarah studied him, her heart a storm. She saw the man who had destroyed her, but she also saw the father her children deserved. She saw the regret etched into his face, the raw devotion in his eyes when he looked at Kai and Luna. Finally, she spoke. "You will not take them from here. You will not parade them as heirs to strengthen your throne. If you want to know them, you'll come here, on our terms. You will earn their trust, day by day, action by action. Fail them once, and I'll end you myself. Damon bowed his head, his wolf purring in submission. Done. I swear it. Kai slipped from Sarah's grasp and ran to Damon, hugging his neck without hesitation. Damon froze, then cradled his son, tears streaming down his face. Luna hesitated, then stepped forward too, her small hand resting against his cheek. Don't make Mama sad again, she warned. Never, Damon vowed, his voice breaking. Sarah watched, her heart torn between fury and a love she thought had died long ago. He had broken her. But he was trying, truly trying. And maybe, for the sake of her children, for the sake of the wolf she had once loved, she could allow him a chance. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a beginning. The Frostborn howled as the children laughed in their father's arms. And for the first time in years, Sarah felt the icy walls around her heart begin to thaw.